Welcome to From Doubt to Destiny,
the podcast where dreams come alive. I'm Eden Ryder, the Dream Maker.
And I'm Stacie Trott, the Queen Maker. We're here to give your dreams the royal treatment that they deserve. Get ready to unlock your queen
and unleash her dreams.
If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you're returning, thank you for coming back. I'm here, Stacie Trott, here with my co-host,
Eden Ryder.
And we are having a conversation today about therapy. I want like a drum roll, so we gotta get some things I can go like, unpacking therapy. So that's the topic. There's so much to talk about. I'm sure we're gonna go in places differently, which is what we do every episode than what we planned, but we're gonna talk about therapy. So, and the hope is to we want to demystify the scariness of therapy, hopefully, for those of you who are like, no way, I would never. We both are have our stories around our resistance to therapy, and we had to be strongly encouraged for an extended period of time before we actually decided to do therapy. And now we are both like, everybody should be in therapy. So it's a very interesting thing because it's, I think, more scary than people would like to admit. But once you actually lean into it, it's the other day I was having a thought that this is a phrase I coined, which is, it's not a phrase, whatever. There's a phrase, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. And so from that place, the other day I was thinking about something and it was like a mountain. And I felt like I heard God say like, this is a hill. Like you have made it into a mountain, but this is just another hill. And so I feel like one way to think about therapy is it's a mountain per step. If you perceive it as a mountain, many perceive it as a mountain, but it is really just a hill. And it is a hill that you actually am like, oh, I kind of want to go up and down this movement here and learn and discover. And so it's a really cool thing. But if you make it out to be a mountain, it can be scary and intimidating. So we're here to help you kind of see therapy as a hill and not the mountain. But at the top, I just like to frame for anyone who's new, every conversation we have, at least until we decide to do something different, we are going to have a topic, which today it's unpacking therapy. We are going to discuss the tension around that topic. And then we're going to have some transformative thoughts, either that we had before or that we are discovering and uncovering while we're having this conversation. And then we're going to list some takeaways that we hope can be food for thought and calls to action for you that you can apply in your own life. And then today we are also going to do our development path / development journey. I don't know why I can't commit to call it one thing, Eden. Is the development path, the development journey. I think we said path, right? Because we're going to do like the candy cane path when we get our act together and get something to visually give that to you. So the development path, which is just 7 D words that we uncovered and discovered together around a path of being with a doubt and moving and migrating through 7 D words to the destiny. So we're going to do that at the end of the episode. So unpacking therapy. Why don't you tell them, Eden, your relationship with therapy?
Absolutely. Well, now, obviously, as I'm sure everyone can tell, I absolutely love it because I think the therapist we both go to comes up in every single episode.
Yep.
But before that, it was a very much like, no, like I know what my issues are, so I don't need to talk to someone about them. Like I can work through them myself. And then also my first exposure to it was when I was a kid. Like my parents got divorced, so I also think I don't know what it's like now, but like in school, like they had this like silly thing called like banana splits, and it was like 4 children who like went through divorce, which there's probably a good intention behind it, but I felt like othered.
Was it a show? Wait, what's banana split? I've never heard of that.
So when I was in school, like during lunch, I don't know if it was like once a month or every 2 weeks, like kids whose parents got divorced would have this separate group and you'd like be taken. And I think it was with a school therapist or counselor. And I just like, and we'd have Sundays and stuff. And I'm like, it just felt bizarre to me. I felt like I was being like called out even more so. For my parents not being together. Like it just, I think there was good intention behind it.
All of the broken children, please come with me to this area so we can talk about your brokenness. Someone thought it was a good idea. They meant well.
So
Banana split.
I remember like that, or like randomly they would just check in on you to like see how you're doing. And then I had to go to therapy, and I like went to 3 different therapists, and it just felt very like, I don't know.
As a kid, your parents required you to go to therapy?
A few times, yes. Like there was just a lot of stuff
Yeah.
going on. So like I went through therapy a couple times, and I
Were you
just,
behaving badly, Eden? What was going
no,
on?
I
Why did they
wasn't.
need
It
you?
was just, it was like adult
You were
stuff
such a
going
good
on.
girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just, I don't know. So I had a very like just negative experience, or I at that time perceived it as negative. But
Yeah.
then as I got older, and I think I've mentioned this before, when I started dating, I was like, oh shoot, you do need therapy. But I was like,
But still weren't willing. You kind of
no,
had the
because I
awareness, but
feel
we're
like
not willing.
I like kind of psychoanalyze myself. I'm like very
Mhm.
analytical. Again, I was journaling and stuff. I'm like, okay, I know where these issues are
Yeah.
stemming from. Like, I think I've got a good grasp on them. Maybe you
Yeah.
can just be aware of it and figure it out yourself. So, long story short, I remember then when I met my now husband, like he had been going to therapy at that point for probably 14 plus years. And
Wow.
he specifically, which is, it's Isaiah, it's who like we are now going to, but he specifically wanted me to go to him. And I'm like, A, not going to your therapist at all. Like that's not happening. B, I'm not going to a
Mhm.
man. Like I was like dead set on the fact that I was like, I feel like I would need a woman. Like I feel like I connect to women more
Mhm.
easily. I think I'd feel
Mhm.
safer. I think I just, yeah, I was just like, that's what it is. So he would
Mhm.
always like kind of push me. I would say like, I can't afford it. Like I came up with every excuse under the sun. And then I might have
Mhm.
shared this before, but finally when I got to the point like, okay, we're married, I had our daughter, and I think we're getting everything like I always wanted, and feeling this. It was a good pressure, but like like so happy and just joyful, but also this pressure of like, shoot, like there's this version of yourself you want to be, and you've gotten to this point, and I think you've done a pretty good job, but like clearly you can't work through some of these things. And they were coming up more, I think, having it where I'm like, you need professional help. Like, therapy works. So like give it a shot. So I went to Isaiah, I went to like hypnotherapy, and I fell in love with it, like absolutely immediately. And I
Well,
even,
take a pause because I think I remember you telling me that you went into the first session and you were like not knowing what to expect, and I think you just cried the whole session.
oh, I'm
Is that what
sure.
happened with like, the
I
first or
mean,
the
that
second one? I
sounds
remember you telling me
right
like
up.
you were like not knowing what it was gonna be, and you like went in and were like weeping, and you were like probably in your head like, "This is why I didn't want to do
Well, it was
this."
so funny because I think it's one of those things too, like I don't think you realize until you're in this space. Like I talk to like my husband a lot, and like I have people who are very like check in on me, but I don't think you realize until you're in a setting where someone's sole purpose is just to sit there
Yes.
and listen to you, and all
Yes.
attention's on you. They have zero other motive. They're not trying to say
Yes.
anything that
Yes.
you're
And
again,
if you pause there for a second, that person, you're not in a reciprocal relationship
right,
with them.
exactly. It's very
You don't know
one-sided.
very much about them, and they're
Yeah.
not disclosing very much about themselves. It is like spotlight on star, you
Yes.
nowhere to hide.
Right. And like you can be quote unquote selfish. Like you don't need to consider the other person's feelings of like
Right.
let them get in what they need to say, or like how is what I'm saying
Yep.
affecting them. Like so having that space. And then I also think again, like I said, I was in a space of like I became a wife, I became a mom, I'm like in the process of quitting a job, like not having, and I did yoga, I meditated and stuff, but like having that much space of like your brain actually quieting down and someone asking you a question of like, so what's going on? And I'm like all of a sudden like like word vomiting all this stuff, and I'm like, where did that come from? Like I didn't even know that
Right.
was going on. So
Right.
yeah,
So therapy, I would say, very similar for me in that I was very resistant to it, didn't want to do it. I had a friend in the season when my marriage was falling apart. I don't know if we were divorced yet, but I was clearly going through a lot. And he kept saying to me, like, you really need to go to therapy. And I was like, I talk to you all the time. I don't need to go to therapy. And I very much was like, from a very analytical place, there is no solution to the problems that I'm
mm-hmm.
having. So there's nothing a therapist can do for me because I saw therapy as a place to help you figure out a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that. So I was no, 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 no. um, uh, no, 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 I don't need it. And then even when I did initially try it, I was like, she's not helping me figure anything out. I laid out the facts to her and see she can't come up with anything else either. And I remember leaving a session one day, walking down the street and being like, yeah, I'm not going to do that again. Because all I do is feel like I just spent time rehashing all the pain that I'm in. And I left and I don't feel any better. But my mindset around what the purpose of therapy was just not right. So to your point, you can go in there and you're like, think you know what it's going to be like, and then it's not what you think it's like
Mm-hmm.
at all. So go ahead, you go in selfish, you're sharing, you're realizing, oh my goodness, there are feelings I have about the season that I'm in that I don't even necessarily know I have, because like, where did all that come from? Where did all that come from? Would you say that you felt like you discovered some things you didn't know you were feeling when you went into that space and you started talking about it?
Yeah, I think again, just having someone like even asking like, well, what do you want to talk about? Or like, what's going on? Or like, give me an update. And the more I started like thinking about things and like thinking about what's going on, it kind of would come like flooding back, or like one thought would come to something that I just generally didn't give myself, I think, the space to even feel that emotion. So I'm like, oh, where did that come from? So it just gives you time to like, I think, process, and also to go through like, it's interesting. Like, I feel like everyone, like to a certain extent, especially for me, where I'm like, again, as things like as I process as like a child and then processing it as like an adult. And I think for me too, like at that time I was becoming a parent, I was becoming wife, like all these things that I always had been wanting my entire life, and now having them and having the sense of like kind of not wanting to, I don't want to say screw it up, but like not wanting to screw it up, and then realizing
Mm.
things that I never, other than in my own analytical mind and my own like journaling, like things that I processed as a kid, and now that I'm like living as an adult, where I'm like, these things aren't serving me. Like I need to come up with a new method. And like I think also, I think there's a statistic, I think I learned this like my coaching certification, like 80% of people have experienced some sort of like trauma, like whatever. And I think it's even higher now since like the pandemic and everything. And I think to myself,
100%.
yeah, I think it is.
It's probably 100.
But like to myself, I think I always would place like hearing the word trauma, I'm like, but that's like people who've gone through like horrendous, like unspeakable
Really intense
things.
things.
And then
Yeah.
just not, and like realizing we all are getting like programmed to a certain extent by everything that's happened in your life and like when you were a kid. So it doesn't even need to be that crazy a thing. Even the same, I think, purpose of like two kids grow up in exactly the same house and they have completely different experiences. It programmed them
Mhm.
completely differently. Like, and
Mhm.
then again, now doing like my training and everything, like everyone's model of reality is just completely different. Like two people can experience things and they'll tell you two completely different stories. So it just made
Mhm.
me realize, like, I'm like, everybody needs this. Like, you need someone who can help you, like, reframe some of these thoughts, like, go through, yes, like, healing some of your past and realizing,
Mhm.
like, this happened to me. It isn't serving me anymore to either, like, frame it in this way, or also, I
Mhm.
think also reframing, like, my relationship with therapy was very much like, oh, something's wrong with me. So I remember I went to him, I think twice, and then we were scheduled to like go again. And I'm like, well, I don't think I gotta go. And my husband's like, excuse me? And I'm like, I'm good. Like, I feel phenomenal. And he's like, that's Eden. Like, no, 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 no. Like, this is a maintenance thing. Like, that's the point. Like, you're feeling good. Like, let's
Mhm.
keep it that way. You don't want to go when we're like trying to put out all these fires and like the world's falling apart. It's very much like, it's probably working. That's why you're feeling really good.
Right.
So, um, I think we've also like just changing my mind. Like it's not like that something's wrong with me. And I think it's making me think of
Mhm.
this book I started that I need to finish. It's Oprah and someone who I think is like a therapist, but it's like what happened to you, and realizing like
Mm.
everybody has a story of something that happened to them, and to have a
Mhm.
person dedicated to their sole interest of like hearing their story and working through that and helping you process whatever that was like in your past and how it's affected you like presently, and then how you can kind of move forward with it is like invaluable for like your healing and then moving beyond that and like growing and evolving and all of that.
I was just recently listening to an interview with Dr. Anita Phillips. I remember I sent you the little snippet of her saying something else, but in it, I was really amazed by how she said that she had been going to God and saying to him what she thought she felt she needed from him, which was answers to why she experienced some of the trauma and why certain things happens in her family of origins, like history growing up. And she said in the course of kind of pushing up against God and saying, I need answers, what God ended up saying back to her was, you don't need answers, you need healing. And so you use the word healing, and that made me think of that past, that revelation that she received, that she needed healing. And I would say, yes, I think we all experience trauma. And it's like there's capital T trauma, which, you could probably make the list of what we think those things are. And I think we eliminate ourselves when we maybe haven't experienced capital T trauma. I used to identify my childhood that way. Like, oh, stable household, you just tell this narrative and it's a glossy one. And then as I get further along and evolved, I'm like, well, no, there has to be stuff in there. And then you start looking and searching, you see, even if it's not a capital T trauma, there's still trauma. And one of the things that I've discovered is that as you are growing up, and I think about this with my son who's 6, right? You're getting programming, but you're also trying to figure out how the world works with a child's perception of trying to understand adult things. And in the course of trying to figure out how the world works, some of that programming gets wonky. And I think that as much as you may want children to like talk to you and tell you what's going on so you can have conversations, they're not probably sharing everything that they're thinking. Not even sometimes out of secrecy, but I remember there's some things that I got in my programming that I just, my assumptions became facts. And then my facts were like, this is just how it is. And so if someone had said to me, is there anything you're wrestling with or that, it's bothering you? I'm like, no, I'm figuring out how the world works. And this is how I think it works. Right. And so there was stuff that got in there, like I think of as like sands in the gears, that I'm just kind of taking as like an accurate assessment of what's going on. But my childlike brain, that's the only way it's gonna absorb it kind of distorted, for lack of a better way of, I don't know if I'm explaining this well. And then I think one of the things that therapy does, it helps you go back and figure out how to, one, identify where you got like a missed message, incorrect programming, they did banana splits with you and you felt like an other. So here they were trying to help you, and it caused something to make you feel like there was some shame maybe associated with the condition of your family dynamic. And so now you're like, oh, this is something to be maybe feeling bad about. And I don't think you probably said it out loud, because why would you? You're just like, this is how it is. And yet it takes being an adult in therapy to go back and tell that story and then have someone go, that wasn't your fault. That wasn't, and then reframing the things that you kind of just like, you just watched it happen almost like it was like a movie, and you don't realize I'm taking in messages and I'm building thoughts and feelings and philosophies and ideologies based on the inputs that I'm getting and the way my body is perceiving it. And then now it's becoming a part of who I am and how I understand how the world works. And I think that's part of the trauma that we can experience. That's maybe not the capital T trauma, but it's still trauma because the messaging and the programming and the understanding, I would guess probably nobody gets that. I don't want to say right or wrong, but gets it all healthy.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? Gets it all healthy. Yeah. And so part of what I've learned in therapy is going back and realizing like, oh, that messaging came in incorrectly. And then I started to believe something to be true that wasn't true. And I never even said it out loud. So I didn't know that I believed that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know I believed that. It just kind of came in. I was like, okay, that's what that means. And then now it just becomes a part of the way I show up. And I don't even know that that happened because it's happening subconsciously.
Absolutely.
So I think, right, so much happens in our development that happens subconsciously that therapy helps you kind of unpack, discover, and then reframe in a healthy way so that you're not operating from these subconscious messagings that you got and learnings that you developed. And like, you don't even know that
Mm-hmm.
happens. That's what's so crazy. You don't even know that happens until you go sit in therapy. So, would you say that was your experience? That's definitely kind of what therapy has done for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 100%. It was like a combination of therapy and then even why now I'm doing this mindset coach training, because I was like, it's crazy how much you like, how much, like, it's, I want to say it's like 97% of your processing every day is subconscious. So you're only consciously aware of, I think it's like 3 or 4%. Um, so it's huge. Like once you realize that, and that you're not even, it's almost, I don't want to say you don't have a choice, but you like didn't have a choice at that time. So there's so many things that you are working through until you become consciously aware of like you said, oh my gosh, like I have this belief and I didn't even realize I had it until like, and I'm like talking through it of like, yeah, that's right. Like I'm operating from this like system. Like if you think of like, I don't know, even like our phones that are always getting updated, like I'm operating from like an outdated system that is no longer serving me and it needs to be like
Yeah.
upgraded. So I definitely like, it was interesting, the timing of therapy and the timing of me like really getting in like this, like thinking more about like mindset work and like becoming consciously aware of mindset and like learning about like subconscious mind, where I was like fascinated, and it was like life changing to me when I guess discovered it, and it's definitely
Mhm.
completely like changed the even trajectory, I feel like, of like my purpose and like what I want to do, like where I'm like everyone needs to be in therapy and be aware of that of like how profound that is in your experience, and how like if you can separate yourself from some of these things that like if you just look at it, it was like downloaded into you and you need to kind of like upgrade that programming, but like nothing's wrong with you, like you're not doing, like you can change it, like just how much more, I don't know if I want to say control, but like kind of control like you have of like you're not defined by like your past or like what happened to you, and you can actually like
Mhm.
learn from it, reframe it, and take some of that pressure off of like, oh, there's something wrong with me, where it's more like this happened and you have an opportunity to kind of change it. You can't change what happened in the past, but you can reframe the way you look at it and release some of it, whether it's like shame or like whatever those feelings are around it. And it kind of just, I don't want to say normalizes it, but there's that healing
Mhm.
of you don't have to be
Mhm.
so attached to it anymore and can like
Yeah.
grow and move beyond it.
Yeah. No, therapy has been life changing for me because it's like you said, it's also when you're a woman, I think we can be very giving of ourselves where we're spending ourselves in so many different areas. And for a decade or so, I was doing talk therapy anywhere from an hour to 90 minutes by myself. And I realized one day, this is the only place I have in my life that is 100% about me.
Mm-hmm.
Every other space or place, I'm paying attention to either a client and what their needs are, my spouse and what his needs are, the person I'm sitting with, and making sure I'm showing up for them in a way that feels comfortable for both of us. And so it's when it was the first time I would say I think I was with another human being and it was just about me, right? When you're by yourself, you can make it about you. But therapy was the only time that I ever felt like I could be in the space of another human and be 100% selfish, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have to ask how you're doing or what's going on in your life. And it's not because I don't care. Over time, you do get to know a bit about the people, the person that you're sitting with. But they're there to serve you. And so one of the other things I want to talk about is like the different types of therapy, because I just started a new, for me, type of therapy called EMDR, which is, I forget what it stands for, but it's really about somatic work, about what's going on in your body, which is a very interesting type of therapy for me, because I didn't realize until I started this therapy that for my entire life, I predominantly relied on my brain, my intellect. Just this was the operating system that kind of did everything. And so in this type of therapy, one of the things she does is ask, like, how do you feel about that? Where does that feel? Where are you feeling that in your body? And I'm like, what on earth are you talking about? Like, there's nothing, I'm not feeling anything from here down. And I remember her asking, where are you feeling it in my body? And I was like, I can tell you what I think. I don't know how to answer that question. And she's like, right, because you're not supposed to know where you have to feel it. And I'm like, what are you talking? Like, I remember the first session I came out feeling so frustrated, because I was like, most things that I apply myself to, I can do pretty well. And I feel like I am in, like, not even kindergarten, I am in pre-K in this environment. And I feel like wobbly. I'm so out of my element of being able to find my footing. But I brought that up to say that there is, in that session, whenever I'm with her, she's always like, I'm supposed to serve you in this session. And little things like, we take a break at one point for snack, and she'll buy me these little snacks, and I'm like cleaning up and putting things away, and she's like, what are you doing? Like, and at one point I was like trying to, and I think I threw out the garbage in the bag that had more food in it, and she was like, you're getting that wrong, because you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing. And I was like, but it feels so odd to me to be in a space and allow someone to take care of me. And I feel like I'm supposed to be giving and doing, or just like doing my part. And so EMDR has been a very interesting space for me. So I wanted to touch on the fact that there are different types of therapy. I think the most traditional one is talk therapy.
Absolutely.
You just sit in a room and you talk. And depending on the type of therapist, I think the biggest probably perception of what therapy is what we see on TV. And so you see typically like the therapist, like in The Sopranos, just like kind of asking you questions and writing things down, and not really
How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? Yeah.
well, right. Or when you try to see what they're thinking, they'll be like, what do you think?
Yeah.
And so it's a mirror type kind of therapy, where it's like, I'm not going to give you anything. I'm just here to like witness your discoveries with you. And I remember also thinking, like, I don't want that, because I want someone to dialogue with me, and I want feedback, and I want advice. And so there are different types of therapy. And I think traditional talk therapy is more like what I described. And then there's like counseling, where they give you advice, and it's more of a dialogue and a conversation. And so those are kind of, I would say, the primary ones. And then there's EMDR. And then you could talk a bit quickly about, or not quickly, you can talk a little about hypnotherapy if you want, since that's a type of therapy that you and your husband introduced me and my husband to. And it's definitely not what we saw on TV. Like, I'm not doing this.
No. Yes, no.
So can you describe what hypnotherapy? Because that's what I think on TV. It's like you're hypnotized.
It is funny. I was thinking about, I'm like, I hope I'm about to do, I should have probably like done like actual definition of hypnotherapy, but yeah, no, it's different. I feel like it's still talking, like it is a lot of talking, but I feel like traditional therapy is very much past oriented, of like kind of explaining your story and like getting into the story, and it's about like them helping you kind of heal that, where I definitely will talk about past things, but I think hypnotherapy is more about your present and like the future, like reframing it, and more working through your mindset and how you're viewing things, and how, like, again, like subconsciously, like how you're speaking, what happened to you, like how that subconsciously affected you. So speaking more to your subconscious, which again is why too, which I don't want to confuse the two, which is I'm gonna say I'm doing coaching, and coaching is not therapy. Like you aren't accredited to like diagnose and like do all of that.
Mm-hmm.
There is some like overlaps in, but it's much more, I would say, like future oriented. And yes, this happened to you, but like in this moment, like you're processing this way. Like, what about like reframing to this? And how you're wording that or how you're approaching that is very like harsh to your subconscious, or you're taking it in a very way that's not serving you. So what about reframing it this way instead, or seeing it this way? So to me, it's very much more like, again, I feel like it's not a rehashing. It's not like bringing up like the trauma and reliving it and healing through it. It's like helping you reframe, understand that like you're processing it this way subconsciously. It's like hitting you this way, and we can reframe this and we can say it in a way that's much more, it serves you better and can help you like work through this and propel you the way that you like, the way you want to go. And then there is a hypnotherapy aspect at the end. What?
I love the way you described it, because I wouldn't have used the word future oriented, but that's exactly, I think, why I liked it, because it's about almost a version of how to heal based on the way that you're thinking about it and the way that you're speaking about it. And the word that came to mind, which is apropos of one of the missions of this podcast, is it's empowering.
Yes, absolutely.
I walk away from sessions and I feel like the reframing has made me go from feeling under something to over it. And it'll take time to get the orientation to really kind of have that being on top of it, having kind of like not under it, over it. It takes time, and that's the hypno piece of it that you just mentioned. But I looked up the definition of hypno really quickly, because I was like, you were like, oh, I want to look it up. I'll look it up. It says hypnosis, also called hypnotherapy, is a state of deep relaxation and focused concentration. I also think is really nice, because you think you're gonna, I remember my perception of hypnosis was that someone's meddling around in my brain.
Yeah.
And I don't want, and I don't want that. The type A controlling part of me goes, I don't want anybody fiddling around in there, or discovering things that I don't want shared.
Right.
Because hypnotherapy, like, they can use it sometimes to try to discover buried memories and stuff. And I'm like, well, if I buried it, I don't know that I want anyone, digging it up. So, but thankfully, you guys had done it and my husband did it. And I was like, oh, it's not anything like what they show on TV. At least this version of it isn't. I'm sure there may be other permutations. But deep relaxation and focused concentration. I had a session yesterday, and I literally fell asleep while I was in the hypno part.
I will say that's happened to my husband before too. I can't say it's ever happened to me. I definitely have gotten very relaxed, but I haven't fallen asleep yet.
I was exhausted, and so it was like, oh wait, I have 5 minutes to close my eyes, and like I could hear myself snoring. I'm sure if in the video, when he sends me, not the video, the recording, I don't know if that'll be in there, but I like woke myself up. But I'm grateful that I could be in a place where
comfortable,
the positive things that he's saying to help reframe my subconsciousness is helping me. So the way our hypnotherapy works is it's like about 40-ish minutes of talk therapy. So you're just talking through, and I don't know if yours works the same as mine, but I pretty much tee up an issue. I talk about it for a few minutes, and then he's vibrating with thoughts about what he wants to say. So I really appreciate that I do less talking in this type of therapy, and I'm receiving more than I'm giving. Yeah. And but it's very interesting because, Isaiah and I have not talked offline about like his background fully, but I very much feel like, specifically, at least in my sessions, there are things that he says that I'm like, I know this is like something God is using you in this moment to say to me, because it's framed in a way even that is like, I mean, he ends up like, he's like, I don't know why this always happens, but I'm talking to you, I always have all these scriptures I want to give you. And it's like, but it's hitting me in spaces and places where I need to hear it. And it's coming from this authoritative God said place, which is like the foundation of what I need to be able to say, okay, I can put this. So and so the 40-ish minutes of talking, he gets the things that need to be reframed. And then the hypnosis piece, I have a different spot in the room where I do my therapy, where I go plop myself down in a comfy chair. I put my head back and my feet up, and he plays some soft music, and he's just saying some affirming statements that are meant to help speak to me in my consciousness, but not primarily. They're for my subconscious to start to reprogram against the things that are what the negative programming was. It's like applying the positive to the negative, but it's specific to what you just talked about
Yes.
for the last 40 minutes. And then he records them and he sends them to you, and then you are supposed to listen to your hypno.
Daily.
I think 4 times, at
At
least
least
4
4
times
times.
a week. I'm not good about listening to my hypno, which is terrible, and it's probably why I'm not necessarily getting all of it, the reprogramming that I need to. But and one of the things I do love that he says is you can listen to it anytime. You don't have to be awake. So when
It's not
I'm
driving.
doing it, correct. That, yeah, he has emphasized. I'm like, I can listen to it driving, but I haven't. But one of the things I have done, because he's like, you can be sleeping, is I have popped my AirPods in and put on a hypnotherapy to go to sleep, because sometimes that's the first time I'm thinking about listening to it because I'm booked and busy during the day. And I appreciate that. There's very few things I can actually do while I'm sleeping, but one of them is drift off to listening to something that's helping reframe my thinking around an area that I have said is a concern for me or I'm struggling with, and it's a challenge. So it's been it's the forward piece of it, I think, that's made it what I need in this season. It's a shifting of the mindset for me versus I spent a decade talking about everything that I've been through. And that was helpful, and I learned and discovered a lot. And in a season where I felt like I just wasn't doing that analyzation because I didn't know what to do with the things that were hurtful or painful, that was really helpful for me. Now it's like, okay, now I need to be in a space of shifting how I'm thinking about things so that I show up differently than I have. So it's very interesting how the needs can change over time. Any other therapies that you're aware of, Eden, that you think could be helpful?
Well, it's interesting. I'm not going to say therapy. So again, I'm not going to confuse the two of like therapists
Yep.
have a lot more training, like they have to stay within certain parameters. So I don't want to confuse the two, but you mentioned like, is it EMDR? So, but like with somatic
Yeah.
work, I will say what's
Yeah.
very fascinating. So like I used to teach yoga, and yoga is like a form, it's considered like our movement for somatic work and everything. And
Mhm.
trauma is stored in your body. So what's so fascinating, like at the end of my like yoga classes, after like doing all that movement and like a certain like stretches, like especially like for women, like there's a lot of like in your hips and stuff, that even
Mhm.
doing yoga, like so in the end, like in shavasana, like I cannot tell you the amount of people that be in full blown like puddles of tears at like the end of my classes. So the combination of, that's where I think even like combinations of therapy are so
Mhm.
powerful, or even to
Mhm.
like the coaching I'm going through now, and kind of like you said, the EMDR, like a lot of that, not, I'm not learning that, but I'm learning actual, like part of it is hypnosis, and like part of it is actually like subconscious, like techniques and tools.
Mhm.
So like
Mhm.
even that of like asking like where that lives in your body, and it can feel so uncomfortable because you want to answer it consciously. So like even in my training so far, and like I had a practice, or I had a client session yesterday, like you have to remind them, like, I'm not, it sounds counterintuitive, but like I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you consciously, I'm talking to you subconsciously. So if you can like get out of your head, like the first thing that comes to mind, like even if it sounds
Right.
nuts, like just
That's
say
the
it.
answer.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, like just the
You're preaching
combination.
to the choir, I think, yourself, right? Because you're like, the first thing that comes to you, that's the
Exactly. But
answer.
it's so interesting. That's why I will say, even in my training, like recently we did a technique called like parts integration. And part of the script, I'm like, this is bizarre. I feel
Oh, she does
uncomfortable.
that all the time. She
Does she?
speaks to my various parts, and I'm
Yes.
like, this is, and she speaks to them by name, and I'm
Yes.
like, oh my
But
goodness,
do
this
wait, did
is
you
so
give her the
wacky.
name?
No, no, she
Oh, okay.
identifies them because when they speak, they sometimes I will say what it is, but sometimes actually she will ask me to say what it is,
Yeah.
but it's really clear what it is based on how it's speaking, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Well,
And for
yeah.
a while, I thought it was super nutty, but then I realized that, and she said this to me, when we speak, you know how you go, a part of me wants to do
Yeah, no,
X.
that's exactly, yeah.
We refer to ourselves as
It's like a
having
third
parts,
part. Mm-hmm.
but we don't name
Them.
the parts. And so in this body work, you actually name the parts, and then you realize there are different parts of you that show up to serve different purposes. And part of what happens is one part can dominate in a space where it's not needed.
Yes. No, it's, yeah, so that's what, like, so I'm learning that, and like we'll be able to offer that to my clients. And I did it the other day on someone did it the other day on me. And I recently just mentioned, I think on another episode, about me having to show up more on social media. And I was like, there's part of me who feels like I want to stay in my bubble, and like it's safe, like I can be whatever. And there's other part of me that's like, no, but this is more of like your purpose, and it's going to provide like healing and all of this stuff. But I was normally I'm like ready. Well, it depends. I'm either like sometimes nervous to be the coach, sometimes nervous to be the client. But for this one, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't want to be the client because this part is not going to have a name. I'm going to like start making stuff up. And when I tell you, when she asked me, like the name came so clearly, and I'm like, this is so weird. Like it can't, like, I think I'm starting to get out of my head in like doing this
Yeah.
work, which has also been very like freeing, I think. But just to say to that thing, like that parts integration thing, I literally got off my call and I recorded like an entire video as soon as I got off the call, and like sent them and sharing. Like it took for me like almost instantly after like doing that integration of like the two parts and realizing they both had the same purpose. Like one was trying to keep me safe. Like they're both one's kind of trying to like keep me safe. And then the other part of me was also trying to evolve and grow and like help fulfill my purpose. But realizing
Mm-hmm.
how like the intentions behind them were both very positive and there was more
Yep.
alike. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess I'm going on a tangent now
It's
because
scary. No,
it's,
you're not on a tangent. We're talking about a type of
but it
therapy
is like a
that,
type of,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I don't want to confuse because some of it's like,
Well, no, Therapy, EMDR is a type of
EMDR
therapy. You were
is, but
coming
like
at it from a
parts,
different
yes.
angle, but it's almost like they're cousins,
But yeah,
if not sisters.
yes. But then me like coaching, there's a lot of these stuff like parts integration as part of like NLP, which isn't a type of therapy. Like I'm not going to be a therapist, but I can offer doing that because that's like subconscious work, but I'm not going to be a therapist. So I'm just saying there's like somatic work, there's these things that are overlapping. And I'm like now in a space, I'm like, give me all of that. Like I
So
need
the
all
thought
of
I'm having in response to that is like, I think it's really important to be grounded.
it. Hmm.
And so while I'm very much curious about growing in various areas of myself, um, I'm very much like grounded in like my faith and what I believe. And so not everything that's suggested to me is for me. So I want to put
Yes.
that star in there because I don't think you can just say, let me open myself up to everything. And then
No.
certain things are like, wait, we're going up into places and spaces that's not what we're doing. So it's important to make sure that you have a good kind of grounding and center of what you believe, and make sure you're just not like, I'll just try anything. And I think it's worth noting, I looked into EMDR because I have a friend who's two different friends who one's a therapist and the other one just had done EMDR herself. And they both said, I think you could benefit from it years ago. So I've been curious about it for a long time. And there were times I go online and look up EMDR to see who does it so I could find someone because the therapist I had didn't do it. And I just kind of, it was there in the background vibrating, but it was like, I don't have time to really do the deep dive of investigating and research I'd like to. But and I shared this on a different episode. We had gone actually away on vacation, and I was in a beautiful place with nothing that I was consciously aware of that was bothering me. And yet I felt like I can't feel anything. And I felt myself watching myself. And I came back from that and I was like, I need to probably see somebody because something's happening and I don't even know how to describe it or define it. And I don't know what to do about it. And that's when I said, let me go and see if this type of therapy that I keep hearing about it, and had started to kind of come up again, listening to a couple of different podcasts, and everybody was talking about EMDR. And I'm like, why do I keep hearing about this? So I was led to discover, and I reached out to the woman who I had the name for a while. And it was like right place, right time. and right person. She's a Christian. She's a woman of God. So as she goes into the spaces with me, she's not taking me into places where I'm like, wait, what are we doing? What are we talking about? So I think that part is important, and you can, be in a Christian space and also explore therapy and not have the two conflict with each other. So for anyone who's like, oh, I don't know how I feel about it, you can still have your center, and yet we're multidimensional. So this is touching other parts of you that, maybe you have been ignoring, because I don't think, for the most part, at least I wasn't, and many people that I know are taught to address the different dimensions. So no one out until the last probably decade of my life has ever even talked about like body work and paying attention to your body and knowing how things feel. And you said something that was really powerful, is trauma can get trapped in the body. And if you actually don't work through it, it will find a way to come out, and it can come out through actions and behaviors, but can also come out with health challenges and various things where you're like, this is trauma trying to find an outlet. And if you won't give it volume with your mouth by working through it, it'll find different places to sit. And I'm not expert enough in the space to talk about it in any deep way, but I've definitely heard it spoken about enough to go like, okay, that's a thing. That's a thing. And if you're experiencing where, I've heard stories of people who are literally like, doctors can't figure out what's wrong with me, but I have these symptoms.
Yeah.
And then you do some work, you can even have some various exposures to healing. And then you're like, wow, the pain went away. And it wasn't through any kind of medication. They didn't find anything in any kind of scans and testing, but there was something in my body that needed to be addressed. And that's a real thing. And I think the purpose of this is to just say there are different types of therapy. And if you're not feeling led, then just be, I think, open with discernment to see, is there something that I might need to get some help with? When you became a mom and a wife, you were like, I think I need help. I've been doing pretty good up to this point, kind of doing it what felt like I'll say on my own, is what I feel like you shared, and then you were like, I could use some support. And I think a great way to think about therapy is having individualized, personalized support.
Yeah.
That's what therapy has been to me. Individualized, personalized, dare I say, I want to find a different word for selfish, because I don't want to say selfish because that feels like
Like a
negative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe self-worthy,
Yeah.
self-loving. And as we put our oxygen mask on, like you say all the time, therapy for me is like a version of putting my own oxygen mask on, then I can serve better and healthier. So in a way, it's not selfish, it's selfless, because when I'm the best version of myself, I can give from a full place versus giving from a place of deficit. And then I'm resenting that I'm feeling so empty because I'm giving, and I'm giving where I'm already at I'm at yellow or red. And I want to give from a place where it's green, which means I need to spend that time in therapy to help myself kind of talk it through and get the support that I need. What would you add to that, Eden?
No, I couldn't.
Oh my goodness, we're 48 minutes in on this topic.
Yeah.
I just totally love Trials of Time. Who knew therapy was going to be? We should have known therapy was going to be a good topic. So we want to wind that down, because we want to try to honor being able to be a time period that you could do like a nice car ride to listen to. If you live in any kind of metro area, you may sit in traffic, and so the hope would be our conversations you could kind of get through in a drive. So there's a lot to talk about therapy, but I hope we've kind of highlighted, for the benefit of those listening or watching, that therapy can be a good thing. And if you were scared, like Eden and I both were, we showed up very intellectually about our fear, but we were scared to do therapy. We have found that what was a mountain, which I started out by saying, really was a hill. And it was a hill you wanted to climb because it was great discoveries. And I love the visual for me of hills. You get to the top and then you kind of go back down, and you go up and you go down, because you can't live on the top of mountains or hills. But the valleys don't have to be so deep when you're kind of dealing with hills, right? They're just kind of like the evolution flow. So consider therapy, consider it. There's tons of options, from free to all the different types and permutations. We are definitely probably the most options available to us in therapy that we have ever had in our lives. So there's options to even be able to do it, and it doesn't have to come with a cost. So until next time, thank you for spending time with us. Bye. Remember to unlock your queen
and unleash her dreams.